Makes me look like I belong here. I work here, and I can hear myself better, so I know if my audio quality sucks. Um. Okay. We are here. Wait. This is not gonna work. Yes, it is. Hey, look. I like these. Make me look like a true podcaster, I guess. I don't know. Or I look like a radio show host. Welcome back to 105.9. Today we're going to be playing America's Top Hits. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, welcome back to the Living Proof Podcast. We are back after Thanksgiving break. Hopefully you guys had an amazing break. I know I did. It was very, I don't know. It was painful. I got my wisdom teeth out on the Monday, and the entire week was just recovering. I'm still recovering. This cheek hurts, and I have some random cut in the bottom of my gum now, so it's going to be hard to talk this entire video. But that's okay because I still wanted to come on here, still wanted to do this regardless. And I'm not going to let a little pain get in the way of me speaking my mind. So, but hopefully you guys' break was good, you know. But yeah, today's topic is going to be pressure because recently I've been feeling a lot of pressure with just life in general, especially my classes coming up to the, I guess, final part of the semester. So I wanted to talk about, you know, pressure, where pressure can come from, how to deal with it, because it gets to a point as a college student where you're faced with pressure like in every direction, even from yourself. So knowing how to deal with that pressure and knowing how to, not even how to deal with it, but just how to think about it and like to approach it from a, you know, kind of Christian standpoint as opposed to just approaching it from a general, okay, boo-hoo, woe is me, it should kind of avoid it kind of thing is more beneficial for your mind. You're more at peace, you're more at ease, you can actually properly focus and stuff like that. So I think it's important to talk about and it's important to gain information on. So that's what I'm going to be trying to do today. And let's just hop right into it. First, where is it? First, starting verses for the day. 2 Corinthians 4, verses 8 through 10. We are pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We are hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we are not destroyed. Okay. Through suffering, our bodies continue to share in death of Jesus Christ, so that the life of Jesus may also be seen in our bodies. Someone just revved their car really loudly. People like to drive down the street and rev back and forth, and I don't know why. I don't know what's so special about this street, but sometimes it gets on my nerves, but I don't know if that came through on the audio at all, but anyway, these verses kind of just talking about, even though we're under pressure and even though we feel pressure sometimes, we are not going to be overtaken by that pressure in a sense. God is always with us and God's still on our side regardless of what crushing weight we feel in the moment, right? Through suffering, our bodies continue to share in the death of Jesus Christ so that the life of Jesus may also be seen in our bodies. So we get put through that pressure, we get put through those hard times or through those burdens and difficulties so that Jesus Christ may be shown through our life. Now, it may not always feel like that. It may sometimes feel like, okay, I'm going through pressure for no reason at all, and it just feels like the world is my enemy and I don't know what to do. And I know I felt like that at times. I have entirely felt like my world's just kind of shattering down. I will say that, like, recently with my computer science class, I talked about this with a lot of people that I know, and it has just gotten to a point. I wanted to do a computer science minor. I don't know if I want to do it anymore, but it's not because I don't like the material anymore. I don't like the content. It's just from the grand scheme of things, it just doesn't look as smart to do it for what I want to do in my career. And so now the class that I'm taking for that minor is now just a class that is adding pressure onto my life. And in the easiest way I could just not do any of the work, get an F in the class, and woe was me, not worry about the pressure from it anymore. But then there's also pressure of not failing because I don't want to get an F in this class and I don't want my GPA to go down. I don't want to lose the internship that I have if my GPA drops below a certain thing. So then it comes with all these other aspects, and I'm like, man, I need to pass this class. I need to get this code done. I'm worried I'm not going to finish it and stuff like that. And it just weighs down on your mind heavily. And so when in that situation, I'm not going to immediately think, okay, yeah, this is a great opportunity to show God, to show everybody around me why I love the Lord so much and why I am a Christian. That's not the first thought. My first thought is, man, how am I going to get through this? This is kind of a bad situation, right? I'm not going to do what I want to do in life if I don't get through this situation. That's my first thought. And I know that's a lot of people's first thought out there. Our first thought isn't usually to go to Christ or to recognize how pressure in a situation can lead us to Christ. But I think in changing your perspective and changing your first views on that, you can then realize exactly what Christ is trying to do in that situation, right? No one can understand what Christ is doing now. I was reading Habakkuk because I was talking about it with a friend, and we read through it, and Habakkuk had all these complaints for God, kind of like Job's situation, but God was then answered him like, you don't understand what I'm doing now, but later you'll see, kind of thing. So again, God's not going to show us, he's not going to allow us to understand now what he's doing, but later on, I need to stop hitting these buttons. Later on down the line, we're going to understand, we're going to be like, okay, that pressure, that situation where I felt pressure, that is now used for good. God, I see how God used me through that to demonstrate his glory, to bring him praise and honor, and, to show the world why I trust in who I trust in. And so in a situation where we're driven to despair, or not driven to despair, I guess we feel like we're driven to despair. We're not supposed to be, because we have God on our side and he's our rock in that situation. But, I guess I wanted to go over, because maybe some people are thinking, okay, you say that pressure comes in, and we're not supposed to be faced with pressure, we're not supposed to give in, we're supposed to trust God, blah blah blah, but how do you go about doing that? Or there's people in the Bible had it easier, they had struggles and they didn't ever blah 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 blah. I have some examples from the Bible of people in pressure, because it shows that even people that are strong in their faith, even people that know God exists, that are experiencing him daily, still have pressure. They still feel that weight of their responsibilities or stuff that they have to do, or authority or whatever. And even Jesus felt that weight. And so it's not like pressure is a bad thing, but letting it overcome the power that God has in your life, that's the bad thing. So first example is Mark 15, verses 8 through 15. Or verses 6 through 15, sorry. Now at the feast, he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he usually did for them. And he answered them. For context, this is like Pilate. The Jews are bringing Jesus to Pilate so that he can pretty much sentence Jesus to death, kind of thing. And that's just the context of what's going on here. So, verse 9, and he answered them, saying, do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews? Verse 10, for he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priest had delivered him up. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have him released for them for Barnabas instead. And Pilate again said to them, then what shall I do with the man you call the king of the Jews? And they cried out again, crucify him. And Pilate said to them, why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, crucify him. So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. And so in this tiny little snippet of verses, you can see how when the chief priest brought Jesus to Pilate, initially Pilate was like, this dude didn't really do anything wrong. Why are you trying to kill him? He didn't break any laws. He's just been living, chilling life. Nothing really happened for him to deserve the death penalty that Barabbas or whoever else was getting at the time. But they were just like, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. And I know we have all experienced this before. When someone is just telling you the same thing over and over and over and over again, you eventually want to give in to that. It's just going to be a nagging in your head, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. And you're just going to be like, okay, fine, I'll do it. Stop pestering me. And so Pilate, after people were just saying, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him, he didn't want to create issues, one, for his social status, which was, he was Pontius Pilate at the time. He was the judge of all these people for Rome. And he didn't want to, give up Because if he said no to the Jews, they probably would have started a riot, said, no, we want him crucified. We don't care about Barabbas. And then just started a fight and probably got him out of his position and elected someone new that would crucify Jesus. So he had that pressure to think about. He had the pressure of the people to think about, just like constantly nagging in his brain. He had the pressure of his conscience to think about, because when you're in that situation, all you're thinking about is, do I give in to the people, or do I do what I know is right, which is letting this man go because he didn't do anything wrong? So he had like 3 different forms of pressure coming at him. And eventually he was just like, okay, you know what? Fine, have it your way. I'll crucify Jesus and Barabbas can go free. And that's what he did. So that's just an example of like pressure from, I guess, the social status that you're in. Because he was a ruler. He was a judge determining the case of Jesus kind of thing. So in his position, he doesn't really have a lot of leeway to just say, no, he didn't do anything wrong. Now, would the right thing to do have been say, no, Jesus didn't do anything wrong? Yeah. But I think it's much easier in that situation to give in to what the people want, to please the people, because you are, after all, a judge for the people, than to do the outlying thing, which is the right thing, even though he knew what was right. Which is kind of unfortunate, because that's how a lot of our society is nowadays. You rather side with the people than do the right thing, which, you know, I've done, everyone's done. It's not something that comes easily, but it does stem a lot from peer pressure, which is, you know, one thing I'll talk about later on. But anyway, another example is Luke chapter 22, verses 39 through 44. Then, accompanied by the disciples, Jesus left the upstairs room and went as usual to the Mount of Olives. There he told them, "Pray that you will not give in to temptation." He walked away, about a stone's throw, and knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet, I want your will to be done, not mine." Then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. He prayed more fervently, and he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood. And so, in this passage, when Jesus was at Gethsemane, I think he was feeling a little bit of the pressure since his sweat was falling down like blood. I think that he was feeling the pressure of what he was about to go through. He was literally asking God, please take this cup away from me. And I've referenced this section a lot in previous podcast episodes, but I think it's a versatile text for a lot of things, a lot of lessons and a lot of teaching, because Jesus goes through a lot in this little quick tidbit of like prayer, but he still goes through with his action, because it's at the end of the day, yet I want your will to be done, not mine. He wants God's will to be done, not his. So in accepting that the Lord's will is in control, he then received an angel to get through the strength of that pressure and finish his prayer, even though he was still sweating like drops of blood. But he then received strength in accepting that he had to go through that pressure situation, right? So Jesus didn't want to do it. He didn't want to go through with dying on the cross. I wouldn't either. Sounds like a really painful way to die. And even he knew he had to take on the sins of the world. So imagine that pain of the cross and then also taking on the sins of every person on the planet. That suffering. And then being judged on the cross. And then interceding daily for people for the rest of your life. Like, I couldn't do that. Jesus is league of his own, but that's why he's God. So imagine that pressure. And then, like, that's just pressure, a lot of pressure from your responsibility, right? Jesus had a responsibility to die on the cross and to offer up himself as a sacrifice for our sins. If he didn't go through with that, then I wouldn't probably be here talking today. I would not be here, probably be dead, because God's provided for me in a lot more ways than just, like, you know, allowing me to live another day. But I'll get to that in another day. I think it's just a lot. It says a lot about what you can do under pressure. Like, Jesus could have just said, you know what, God, I'm not doing this. I know I have to do it, but I'm not doing it. But instead, he said, yet not my will be done, but yours. I want to get away from this pressure, yet not my will be done, but yours. I want to feel some peace, some comfort. I want to step out of this situation and step into a new situation where I am in the most comfortable position for me. Yet not my will be done, but yours. Sometimes God does not want us. This may sound bad to you, but hear me out. Sometimes God does not want us to be in the most comfortable position. when you are in a comfortable position, that means either one, you're not growing, or two, you are regressing, Like, if you are not progressing forward, you will not feel the strain of progressing forward. If you're lifting weights in the gym and you're not feeling discomfort, you are stationary. You're not lifting more than you're capable of lifting, right? If I don't feel some type of soreness or pain the next day, that's not always an indicator, but that means my muscles, they worked. They were torn down. They're now repairing themselves. They now are weaker because they're building themselves back up to be stronger. So if I'm not trying to get closer to Christ and falling down more often, recognizing that I'm falling down more often, then getting up with his strength to become stronger in the process, I'm just sitting stagnant. And God putting me into that situation of discomfort, he wants me to then realize, okay, I'm faced with this pressure, I'm faced with this pain, I'm faced with this agony, but it's his will, it's not mine. So while I would rather be in a comfortable position, like me right now, while I'd rather be in that bed over there, laying down and sleeping, I have things that I need to do. And understanding that, recognizing my responsibility, and asking God to give me strength for that, because it's his will, not mine, allows me to grow, not only mentally, but physically, spiritually, and, internally. Like, everything grows when you seek the situations that you don't want to be in. Now, you can take that with a grain of salt. Obviously, don't put yourself in situations that are obviously discomfortable or uncomfortable just because you want to be in a position of uncomfort so you can say you're growing. Like, if I put myself in a situation where I'm in a rehab from let's say I'm rehab from an injury, or a PT from an injury. I ran in front of a car to get free tuition, and I got hit by a car, and I didn't get free tuition. Now I have to recover from my leg, and every day is a pain to get up, and I don't want to get up, but now I have to do it. That was just a stupid thing to do. Like, I put myself in front of a car to get free tuition. That was a dumb thing to do. So don't make foolish decisions, obviously, but sometimes the pressure situations you are put into, they can't be avoided. God wants you to go through that, to recognize where he is in that situation and to grow with him. So that's just another way that I guess people can feel pressure. Another example is from Daniel chapter 3, verses 13 through 23. Very popular, section of verses. Then Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage and ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him. For context, right before this, Nebuchadnezzar was a king. He built a statue of himself, and he's like, everyone around here has to worship that statue, or else you will be thrown into a giant furnace. And for the most part, everyone was doing it. But then this priest came to him. He's like, hey, these guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they don't want to, bow down to that statue of yours. I think you should throw them in the furnace. So Nebuchadnezzar was like, bring them before me. When they were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods or to worship the gold statue I have set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I have made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace, and then what God will be able to rescue you from my power? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face became distorted with rage. He commanded the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So they tied them up and threw them into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. And because the king and his aide had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the 3 men in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames. Before I get into the pressure, I just want to say that's crazy. He lit up a fire that was so hot that it killed the guys that were throwing them in, but the guys that were thrown in didn't die. That's already a sign that you messed up. If the guys throwing them in burned to death, and the people that were thrown in didn't immediately burn, that's kind of crazy. But I don't know. Anyway, that situation, I think that's a good example of how to deal with pressure and how us as Christians should react to certain pressures, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were literally threatened with death. And some people in the New Testament, some of the disciples and other prophets were threatened with death as well if they were a follower of Christ, and they still claimed that they were a follower and faced death. They were a martyr for the cause, And so I think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is a good example to follow in terms of how we should act when we're faced with pressure and when we're faced with certain situations. When we're faced with that kind of pressure, we should then be like, okay, yeah, this is happening, but I know my God will get me through it. Yeah, I'm facing the fire and flames, but I know my God will protect me. And even if God doesn't protect me, I will never give in to this pressure, and I will never give in to the command that you're telling me to do. Because they were like, even if God doesn't do it, he's still our God. Even if God doesn't provide right now, he's still our God. Even if I'm still submitted to this pressure situation, he is still our God, right? He's not going to change and become not my God just because something didn't happen my way. And because their faith was so strong, they ended up, living through the fire. And God was with them in the fire. So even then, God still did what he said. God still did what they believed he was going to do. Even though they outright said, even if he didn't, he still did. But even then, if God doesn't answer our prayers right now immediately, if God doesn't show up on my doorstep, ready to deliver me a package of grace and prosperity and wealth, I'm still going to trust in God to deliver me from any situation. Because that trust alone makes my life so much easier. That trust alone gives me something to hope and gives me something to believe in and gives me a reason to get up day after day. It gives me a reason to put my faith and my trust in something other than, the world, my own strength, my own power. Proverbs 24:10, which I was going to get to later, but it says, if you fail in the face of adversity, your strength is weak. If you fall in the face of adversity, your strength is weak. So if we fall, our strength is weak. Yeah, sometimes we are weak and we fall. We are humans. We're sinful. That's going to happen. But then the Bible says later on that when we are weak, God is strong. So when we're weak, when we do fall in the face of adversity, we then need to rely on Christ to get us back up. And that's the hope that we should have. That's the hope that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had to get them out of the fire. They knew that if they would fall into that fire, if they fell into that predicament, if they fell into that situation, then God would lift them up again and God would protect them, raise them up, because that is the kind of God he is. He's not someone that allows us to suffer and allows us to go through temptations and trials just for the fun of it. And if we don't bow down on our hands and knees and worship him, then he's going to make our life a living hell. That's not what he does. He's a loving God. He's a caring God. He's a good God. And them trusting in his personality got them through that situation. The same way me or you trusting through his personality will get us through any of our situations. It's a matter of trusting his identity, not trusting our situation, If I were to only trust my situation, then yeah, the pressure is going to overwhelm me. And I'm going to feel like, man, I'm not going to get through this. I know my God is my God, but at the same time, he's not coming through for me right now. So all hope is lost. No, that's not how hope works. If God was that fickle that if he didn't come through one time, we could stop putting our hope in him, we would all be going to hell. Every single person on this planet would be going to hell because God has had times where he has not immediately come through for us. So if we gave up after that one instance, we would all not be believers. I know every Christian has struggled with that same instance of God does not show up immediately. I don't know if he's going to show up, but I trust in him anyway. If we chose to not trust in him anyway, there would be no faith. There would be no hope. There would be no salvation. We would not trust in God. So I think it's an important thing to realize that you have to trust in the identity of the Lord if you want to get out of the situation you're in. If you want to get out of that predicament, if you want to escape that pressure, you got to trust in God and his identity. Because otherwise, how are you going to have something to rely on? How are you going to have someone to lift up the weight, the burden of that pressure, if you don't have Jesus who can lift up any weight, any burden? His burden is light. His yoke is easy. It's not rocket science. Well, it's harder to do in practice. Yes, that is the whole point. It's harder to do in practice. I can know this a million times and still fail to do it every single time. But it's about putting in the effort. It's about putting in the effort. It's lifting the weight. If I lift 140 pounds, let's so I'm shoulder pressing 140 pounds, right? Shoulder press 140. I can only do it 5 times. If I keep doing that day after day after day, obviously with some rest days, but day after day after day, eventually I'm going to be able to do it 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 times. And if I go to that max again, I'm going to be able to do it 15 times. That's just how it works. So if we fall now, if we suffer through that pressure now, and we don't get through it and we, fail to overcome it, then we try again the next time. and we try again the next time, and we call on God the next time, and we get his strength the next time, and eventually we'll be able to do it. And will we fall again? Yes. But the more we call on him and the more we get that strength, the more we ask him for the more we ask him for help and for guidance and for assistance in our walk and in our journey in life, the more we will be strengthened up and the more we will be a spiritually mature person, in the sense that we won't fall to the same things that we used to fall to. We won't give into that same pressure that we used to give into. We won't give into that same mindset of, okay, I'm a sinner, I'll just let it slide one more time and then I'll turn to God, that we used to give into. So I think that mindset that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had is something that we all can and should learn from. And it's just, an important thing to realize, that we should all learn from something like that. What is going on with my watch? I don't even know. Who cares? The last example I want to go through, and an example which I think most directly ties to peer pressure, is from Luke 22, verses 54 through 62. Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house, and Peter was following at a distance. And when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light and looking closely at him, said, "This man was also with him." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." And a little later someone else saw him and said, "You are also one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, "Certainly this man also was with him, for he too was a Gentile. For he too is a Galilean, But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you'll deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. But that, I think, is the most... Jesus said it would happen. Jesus said that Peter would deny him 3 times before the rooster crows, right? And obviously Peter did end up doing what Jesus said he would do. But I think the more important thing is the realization that he wasn't even thinking about it at the time until the rooster crowed, and then he remembered what Jesus said. The pressure of the people around him just asking him and pushing that on his mind, after knowing that being associated with him was seen as a bad thing by the peers around him. He didn't want to be seen as that guy that was hanging out with Jesus, right? Like, Peter loved Jesus to death, yeah, but when you're in a bad situation and the peers around you are all like, "Oh, you associate with that guy? Ugh, don't talk to me. Don't talk to me." You're not going to be advocating. You're not going to be advertising yourself as like, "Oh yeah, I follow that guy. What about it?" Like, you're going to be like, "No, I don't know him. I don't want to associate anything with him, guys. Believe me, I don't want to talk to that guy." And that's what Peter was doing. He felt the peer pressure of those around him, and he was like, "Okay, I'm just going to not associate with Jesus, and we'll see what happens." And so that's what he did. That is how he acted. And afterwards he was like, "Man, that sucks." And he cried about it, because I would cry about that too. If I was so adamant about following a man that was going to die on the cross for my sins, and all of a sudden I deny him 3 times, I'd feel kind of bad about that. And I think this is another lesson that we can learn in dealing with pressure, to stand our ground, to stand firm. Peter had been following Jesus for weeks upon weeks before this, and now all of a sudden he's going to turn his word based on the word of a couple random people, as opposed to the Messiah, the Son of God, right? It's like, how in the world, not how does that make sense, but how is that a logical thing to do? To know who you're following, to trust in who you're following, but the second other people come around and try to impart their thoughts on your own lifestyle, all of a sudden you adhere to them instead of the person you've been following and know to be true and know their teachings for I don't even know how long. It just doesn't make sense. And us as Christians nowadays, we know that Jesus is the Son of God. We know that he died on the cross. He didn't even die on the cross yet in this. And yet, Peter is still, he's still a firm follower. He's still a firm believer. And even afterwards, he was still a firm believer. But we know that Jesus died on the cross. We know that he's the Son of God. We know that he's coming back. So what other reason do we need to stand on our ground, to stand firm and to be like, "Hey, yeah, I'm a follower of Christ. What about it?" To hear people disrespect his name in public and stand on that ground, even though you're faced with the peer pressure that you might get judged, you might get looked at funny, you might tell your friends that, "Yeah, I'm a firm follower of Christ," and they might stop being your friend. But if that's the case, they weren't your friends to begin with. If they don't like Jesus or Christianity that much that they will stop being your friend for it, then that's an issue that God has to settle with them. That's nothing you can do, and that's nothing you should worry about. Plus, if they're your true friends, I don't think they should care about your religious affiliation, though you should probably talk to them about it. I don't think that they would judge your friendship based on that if they were your true friend. But even then, if your friends are judging you for that, let them judge. Let them look upon you with disdain. Let them look at you weirdly. Let them look at you with a look in their eye that says, man, I do not want to be around this guy. Let them do that. You are proudly following the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. You know exactly who you believe in. You know exactly what he stands for. So why, when other people look at you funny, you're going to doubt the one who you trust in and who you believe entirely 100%? Don't doubt that. Always stand firm on your ground. And that's what God is teaching us with Peter's situation. To stand firm on your ground. To say, yeah, I believe in Jesus. I am a follower of Jesus. And that is my identity. My identity is in Christ. I'm not going to deny my identity. If people came up to me and said, are you Landon? I'm not going to say no. Now, to be funny to some people, I might be like, I might be. Maybe. Who's asking? Like that, yeah, that might be a response, but I'm not going to say I'm not who I am. I'm not going to lie about it and say, yeah, my name's Jake. My name is Jeff. My name is Austin, from Austin and Alley, actually. Yeah, they changed the casting a couple years ago. I don't know if you knew, but I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, yeah, I'm Landon. Who is asking? Like, who? Why? Why do you want to know? In the same way, if someone asks you if you're a follower of Jesus, that's your identity. Be proud in that. Stand in that. Don't succumb to the pressure of people being like, so you're one of those Christians. Like, yes, I am a Christian. Yes, I'm a follower of God. What's so crazy about that? I don't think that's such a terrible thing to do. And, you know, when faced with that pressure, it's like, I don't know if I should side with the people or side with God. I'd rather side with the person who's going to decide where I stay for eternity than side with a bunch of people who are only here for about 70, 80, 90 years and then go off to the afterlife, wherever they go. So, in the grand scheme of things, one person has rule over my life and created everything and is going to be around for a lot longer and has been around for a lot longer, as opposed to these people who are humans with human knowledge and human mindset. One clearly looks like the wiser person to trust. So, anyway, a lot easier said than done, but this is just like going through it, giving reasoning, because there should be a reason behind everything you believe. I think there is a reason to trust in the words of God and to stand firm in your ground for the Lord, much more than it is to stand firm in the ground for the people of the world. But that is just me. Anyway, that's my last example of pressure. But there's also pressure from your mind. There's also pressure from stress of school. Also pressure from classes, pressure from friends, pressure from relationships, pressure from expectations, pressure from your family. I've had pressure from my family for years, though they didn't intend that for me. That's just how it went down. And I've had pressure to get good grades. I've had pressure to find, quote unquote, the one. It's just pressure. And it's from my own mind too. Like, nobody else is telling me to do this. Nobody, my parents never said, you have to be a perfect A+ student or we're going to be upset with you. But that's just what I believe in my head, because that is my mind telling myself that. And it's taken me such a long time to even get that letter grade to just go away. Now I know that they just want me to do well. But even then, it's like, what is well? Was it not an A? Like, but pressure, I'm just saying, pressure comes from all around you. So I think in dealing with that then, how do you deal with pressure? Yeah, how do you deal with pressure? You can't, first things first, you can't entirely avoid it, right? There are people that say when they go up for, let's say, a piano performance or a track and field meet or a soccer game or anything like that, they say, oh, I'm not nervous. I don't feel any pressure. It's just a game, or it's just a performance. It's just a practice, just an extended practice. That's all it is, which, while they might be true and while they might not feel pressure in that situation, I promise at some point in their life or at some point later on in their life, they will feel pressure in a different situation or with the same situation, just with a different, certain factors are differing or certain people that are there that weren't there before kind of thing. Say if they were playing a soccer game for fun all the time and then the next game their parents show up and all of a sudden they're locked in like it's the FIFA World Cup 2022 finals and they're trying to win against Mbappe. Like, that situation just changes. The people that are there, their parents weren't there before in the other games. So yeah, they didn't feel pressure before, but they do now. Pressure will always be something that exists. You will always have pressure in everything you do, whether it's taking a volleyball and hitting a perfect serve or trying to get 100% on a test. There will always be pressure from the things around you, if not your own head and your own doubts. So now, knowing that pressure cannot be avoided, how then do you deal with it? And I think an important thing to know is that your faith in God should be greater than the pressure from the outside. And I think that's a excellent way to deal with it. I think that's how I would deal with it if I were under pressure 24/7. My faith in the Lord should be greater than any of the pressure that I fear, right? Like I was saying before, I know who my God is. I know his identity, and I know that he has tasked me with things that I have the ability to do. And even if I don't have the ability to do them, calling on God, I then can do them, right? Some people say, God will never give you anything you can't handle. And then they'll be like, yes, he can. He gives you stuff that you can't handle, so you realize to turn to him. But even in turning to him and asking for his strength, you will then be able to handle it. Did they say handle it on your own? No. You won't be able to handle it on your own. You're so right. God is there with you. He gives you that strength to handle it. But he gives you that strength to handle it. You will eventually, God's not going to step in and move my hand and make me eat food or something like that. I'll still have to do the action of handling it. I'll still have to do the action of overcoming that pressure. It's not in my own power. So yeah, God will give you things that you will not be able to handle. But it's only because you need to rely on his strength. You are not a one-man island. You cannot do things by yourself. You cannot overcome pressure by yourself. That's why I think having that faith in God, knowing where your strength comes from, knowing where your hope comes from, then translates into being able to overcome that pressure, right? Psalm 118, verses 5-6. When hard pressed, I cried to the Lord. He brought me into a spacious place. The Lord is with me. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? And I would like to think that that's the verse section that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thinking about. Even though, Psalm wasn't written yet. But yes, it was. But I doubt that they knew this psalm specifically. Anyway, but even then, was it? I don't even know. I'm not into theology. I don't know the exact history of every single book of the Bible. But I would like to think that this is the verse section that they were thinking about. Like, what can mere mortals do to me, man? Even if I get thrown into this fire, what can they do to me? God's got me, kind of thing. And even then, nowadays, what can mere mortals do to us, right? We have an eternity with Christ down the line. What can a mere human do to me? What do I have to fear from someone calling me names or someone exemplifying why they are judging me or their judgment or their envy or their ego or their pride? What is that going to do to me? What can a mere mortal do to me, man? God is my rock and God is my salvation. What can they do that God cannot take and protect me from or take and turn into something better? That's the kind of mindset we need to have in order to deal with those kind of pressure situations, right? Say, I'm about to take a test and I'm stressing, all this knowledge is in my mind. Okay, I know I've studied this information. I know about surface integrals. I know about Green's theorem, Stokes' theorem. I know about flux, divergence, all these other things. I'm going to do great, but I'm kind of worried. There's so much pressure. I got to do well in this test. I need to get an A in the class, blah, 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 blah. What can this situation do to me that God cannot turn into a better situation, right? Whatever the outcome of this test, I will still try to get an A. Yes, I will strive to do the best. But the pressure is then at least a little bit lifted when you realize that if I fail this test, it's not the end of the world. Because what can this test do to me that God cannot turn into something better, right? What can this test do to me that God cannot work for good? Now, does that mean give up on everything and let the plan just take its course? No, because we're still required to put in effort for life. We're not just supposed to go through life all hunky-dory like, man, this is so easy. Life is so good. I'm floating like a butterfly. Oh my goodness. Like, no, we're not. We're not meant to just sit through life and be like, man, this is so nice. I'm not doing anything because God's going to take care of everything for me. He's going to feed me all my food on a silver platter with a golden spoon and everything will be great. That is not the life of a Christian. That is never said anywhere in the Bible. Please check yourself if that is what you believe, because life is not easy and life is not going to be easy as a Christian. In fact, you will probably have a harder life as a Christian than you will as a non-Christian. And people that are not Christian could say, oh, I have a harder life than so-and-so. They seem to have it all. Like I was saying in another episode, surface value, bro. You're never going to see what happens underneath. Maybe they're struggling every day. I know as a Christian, I'm struggling every day. No one sees it every day, but I am. And to say I'm not would be a lie. But to say that other people have it worse or better than me would also be a misguided statement. Now, I do say that Christians sometimes have it worse than non-Christians. That's because they're living in a world of sin and they're doing sin. They're doing what the world wants. That's going to be much easier than doing what the world does not want, right? We're Christians, we're following God. The world does not want us to follow God. The world wants sin. The world's a sinful world. Sin likes sin. Sin's going to be in the presence of sin. So when we do things that are not sinful, when we follow someone that's not sinful, we're going against the stream of the world. We're going this way, the world's going this way. This is not easier than this. While you may still face struggles going this way, it's going to be much easier than going this way. So I'm just, from a spiritual standpoint, people that are following the Lord and following Christ are going to have it much harder than people that don't. Because that's just one less aspect of your life to worry about. Yeah, you'll still have struggles. Yeah, you'll still suffer. Christians suffer too. Christians and non-Christians suffer alike. But one is focusing on following the Lord and one is focusing on getting through the struggle. And I feel like one is definitely easier than the other. And you can say, oh, no, following God is definitely easier than dealing with depression or any of those things. And I'm not going to say something's easier or harder, but, you know, if you were put to the test and had to die for following God, I think you would choose not following God. But that's just me. I don't know. I can't speak on that. I'll probably get to that in a later episode, honestly. But another verse that I had is another Psalm. I'll pull it up. Psalm 46:10. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. Exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." Be still and know that I am God. Again, knowing Christ's identity will get you through that pressure. Knowing you can rely on someone will get you through that pressure. And it'll get you through whatever test or exam or relationship struggle or family issue or expectation that you set for your own self mentally. Because you know that God, you know what God thinks of you. You know what God believes of you, regardless of your results in any certain aspect of life, right? Say that same test that I was talking about. It was Calculus 3. Say if I fail that Calc 3 test. My identity does not lie in that test. It lies in Christ. So if I fail that test, my life isn't over. Because my life isn't defined by the grades that I get. My life isn't defined by the relationships I'm in. My life is not defined by the car or the house or the money that I have. My life is defined by Christ. And knowing Christ, knowing his identity, knowing who he is, will then allow me to know who I am and to know what God thinks of me. Then my identity is firm. And then whatever pressure comes at me, I have a firm foundation. I'm not going to go under. That reminds me of the song lyrics. Yeah, but I will not be going under. I'm going to be standing firm on my ground because I put my hope in Jesus, right? It's simple to talk about, difficult to practice, but simple to talk about, right? If your hope is in Jesus, you have that firm foundation. When pressure comes, when the wind blows, when storms rage, you're not going to get shifted from where you're standing because you plant your feet in a firm foundation, and that's Christ's identity and your identity in Christ, rather. So you plant your identity in Christ, your identity will not be shaken by the stuff that goes on around you. You plant yourself in Christ, you will not be shaken by the stuff that goes around you. So that's just another thing to recognize when you're dealing with pressure. Know where you are planting your identity in. If you're dealing with pressure and you planted your identity in your grades, then yeah, it's going to seem like you're going to lose your life if grades are going to go badly because your identity is in your grades. If I planted my identity in my video game ability and I start losing game after game after game, I'm going to start feeling like I'm losing myself because I'm not good at games anymore. Who am I if I'm not good at games? Right? So who am I if I'm not a follower of Christ? If I'm always a follower of Christ, if I'm always in the identity of Christ, my identity will never be lost. It will never go away. And God's always the same. So my identity is not going to change because God doesn't. So it will never go away. It'll always be there. And that'll always get you through that pressure and through that time. Another verse section that I like is James chapter 1, verses 3 through 8. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has the chance to grow. So let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. If you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. But when you ask him, be sure that your faith is in God alone. Do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. Such people should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Their loyalty is divided between God and the world, and they are unstable in everything they do. When your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow, but when you ask Him, be sure that your faith is in God alone. 3 statements. When your faith is tested, your chances of endurance to grow. When you ask Him, be sure that your faith is in God alone. People should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such people should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Pressure and situations like that give us an opportunity to test our faith. And while, like me, a lot of people do not see the need for a test, we do not see the need for exams in class and in school, teachers and schools and other people have deemed them necessary. Why they deem them necessary, I have no idea. I don't really care. I have to go through it anyway, so I'm not going to question them. But God testing our faith, we still may not see that significance, right? We may not see the point of that test, or we may not see the point of that trial that we're faced with. But God has a plan. God knows exactly why He put that trial and that test in your life. And He knows exactly what's going to happen afterwards. But our task then is to have faith through that. He's testing our faith. He's testing how we react to that pressure, to that situation, to that predicament. He's testing if we're going to go rely on Him, or if we're going to go rely on something else. If we're going to know where our identity relies in Him, or know our identity lies somewhere else. If we're going to be loyal to Him, or loyal to something else, or both, which in a sense is loyal to something else. If you're loyal to 2 things, you're loyal to the other thing. Because if you were truly loyal to God, that other thing would not be a question. And that's something I'll probably get to in another episode. But where is it? Do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. A person with divided loyalty is unsettled as a wave in the sea. So do not divide your loyalty between God and something else. If you're going to trust in God to get through pressure, trust in Him. If you're going to trust in something else to get through pressure, trust in that. But don't pick between the two. Don't disrespect God by picking between God and, like, I don't know, video games or something. Because God can get you through that situation, but you have to fully put your trust in Him. You have to entirely give yourself to Him. Entirely give your mind up, your situation up, your worries up, and just let Him take control. Then you'll be able to get through that situation because you'll have the strength from the Lord. It's not just going to be you anymore being like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Oh my gosh, I'm just going to avoid my stress and my predicament by playing games or going outside or playing volleyball or whatever. Yeah, that's a temporary fix, but you're still going to be faced with that pressure later on. So what you can do about it is pray about it, put your trust in God, know your identity, and then just act it out. Act as if you believe. Act like you believe, because you do believe, right? So act like it. It's easy to say, oh, I believe that, I don't know, let's say a controversial thing. I believe that guns should be banned, right? But if I have a gun in my house, I'm not really living like that belief is true, right? I'm going to hold on to a gun and be like, well, actually, I think that guns are kind of beneficial, so that's why I got one, but I still believe that they should be banned. Like, no one's going to believe you. They're not going to take you seriously because you're going back on your word that you're so very adamant about. And so if we are Christians and we believe in the Lord, we're going to fall down sometimes, yeah. But if we're more or less living like we believe, that's going to show. That's going to show to our friends, it's going to show to our peers, it's going to show to God, and it's going to show to ourselves. And even more importantly, it's going to show to the enemy that's putting pressure on us, right? It's going to show to him that no matter what he throws at us, we're still going to trust in God. No matter what he throws at us, we're still going to rely on our Savior. No matter what he throws at us, our identity is not shaken. And that's the important thing. No matter what Satan throws at us, no matter what he conjures up in our mind, no matter what our flesh tells our brain, we have the confidence in Christ and our identity that he will get us through every situation, and he will take that pressure load off. That verse that I was talking about earlier. Where is it? Okay, there. Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30. Come to me, all who are labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Again, we have to go to Christ and we have to trust in him. We have to give our full loyalty to him and give all our burdens to him. Say if someone's trying to solve, if I give, let's say I'm doing computer science. If I give my auto grader 3 out of the 4 files that I need, they may be able to solve, I may have gotten 100 on the thing. They may be able to grade it effectively, and I might have done well. But they don't know if I don't give them that last file, if I don't give them that last piece of code that they need to determine if everything is right, to determine if I need help, to determine blah, blah, blah. Right? If I give them 3 out of the 4 files, they can't really grade it because they need that 4th file. They can't help me because they need that 4th file. Same thing. If I give God some of my burdens and keep holding on to the other ones, God can only help me so much before I realize that I need to give him everything, or else I'm not going to get help with everything. If I'm so worried about my grades, but I keep clutching on to the idea that I need a perfect grade or else I'm going to fail in life, then God's not going to be able to help with that, because that's the thing I have to give up. I have to give up that worry. I have to give up that desire to be perfect and to just let God take control. Then he can work in my heart and change me around for the better. Then that pressure is lifted and I can feel at ease. Burden will be light. Yoke will be easy. So in giving God everything, you have to give him everything. Your loyalty cannot be divided when your faith is tested. So learn to give God everything when you're dealing with that pressure. It's very hard, very difficult. But as I'm saying, as you build muscles, as you train anything, the more you do it, the easier it'll get. The more you try to do it, the easier it'll get. The more you do it, the more it'll become muscle memory, and you'll try to do it just out of instinct, not even thinking about it anymore. So try it. The next time you're faced with a pressure situation, the next time you're faced with any difficulty or a test coming up or a relationship issue or anything like that, the next time you're faced with that pressure from your mind, give it up to God. Say a quick, say a medium, say a long prayer. Talk to the Lord about whatever's on your mind. And try and give everything up to him entirely. After you're done with that prayer, don't say another thing about it. Don't mention it again. Don't think about it again. And just do the best of your ability for what you got going on. And see how God works. See what he does for that situation. Just give it up to him. Don't stress about it anymore. And see what he does with that situation. I can promise you 1,000% that whatever situation you gave up to him, it will work out in the long run. And the long run may not be your long run. Your long run may be 1 year. His long run may be 2 years. It may not always seem like your timing lines up with God's. In most cases, it doesn't. But that's just because he's working in ways that we can't see. When we think we're ready, he's still working. When we think we're done with a situation, he's still got it on hold. So always just trust in him. So next time you're going through that situation, say a little prayer. Give it up to God. Don't worry about it anymore. Just do the best you can, and God will for sure work it out without a doubt every single time. But that's about it. That's all I wanted to talk about today. You can tell I've been watching Moist Critical videos because at the end of every video is like, that's about it. See ya. And I was thinking about doing that, but I'm like, I'm not going to copy it. So I have to come up with my own outro thing. But I don't know. I'll come up with it later. Or I don't know. But that's all I wanted to talk about today. Dealing with pressure. Hopefully you guys learned something today. If not, then feel free to ask me questions, things you're confused about. Feel free to message me, email me, Slack me, WeChat me. I don't care. Contact me somehow and ask. And I will see you guys next week. Have a great day and stay blessed. I'm going to be like Kageyama. Stop. Never mind.